For nearly 6 decades, the question has haunted criminologists, historians, and amateur sleuths alike. Did Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers actually escape from Alcatraz, or did the cold waters of San Francisco Bay claim them? The 1962 prison break has become American folklore, a story that transcended its true crime origins to become something closer to mythology. But mythology, as it turns out, is simply history waiting for better evidence. In March 2025, a team of forensic oceanographers and cold case investigators announced that they had finally cracked the case, using technology that didn't exist when the 3 men vanished into the fog. Their conclusion, unveiled at a press conference in San Francisco, has sent shockwaves through both the scientific community and the legion of amateur detectives who have spent decades arguing over every scrap of evidence. The breakthrough came from an unlikely collaboration between the United States Geological Survey and a private Dutch hydrology firm that had originally developed tidal modeling systems for shipping lanes in the North Sea. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the lead investigator on the project, explained that previous attempts to determine the fate of the escapees had relied on rudimentary tide charts and assumptions about the bay's behavior on the night of June 11, 1962. What we did differently was incorporate sediment data from the bay floor, wind patterns from NOAA archives, and a new computational model that simulates human survival in cold water with unprecedented accuracy, she told reporters. The team spent 18 months reconstructing the exact conditions of that night, factoring in variables that earlier investigators had either ignored or lacked the technology to measure. The result was a minute-by-minute simulation of where a 6-by-14-foot rubberized raft would have drifted, how long 3 adult men could have survived in 53-degree water, and most critically, where any debris or remains would likely have ended up. What the simulation revealed was startling. Contrary to the official FBI conclusion that the escapees almost certainly drowned within hours, the new model showed a narrow but plausible window of survival. Between 11:07 p.m. and 11:23 p.m. on June 11, 1962, the tidal current shifted in a way that would have carried a properly launched raft toward Angel Island rather than out to the Golden Gate Bridge. The timing was critical. A margin of just 16 minutes separated a survivable crossing from certain death. The simulation also demonstrated that the homemade life vests, which critics had dismissed as laughably inadequate, would have provided enough buoyancy and thermal protection for approximately 45 minutes of immersion. Combined with the raft, which the model showed remaining intact for at least 2 hours, the 3 men could theoretically have reached the northern shore of Angel Island with their core body temperatures still above dangerous levels. But the simulation alone wasn't enough to solve the mystery. The real breakthrough came when Vasquez's team cross-referenced their tidal data with newly digitized Coast Guard logs from June 1962 that had been stored in a Virginia warehouse for decades and only recently scanned into searchable databases. Those logs contained a curious entry that had been overlooked by every previous investigator. At 2:17 a.m. on June 12th, a small private fishing vessel named the Sea Sprite radioed the Coast Guard to report an unidentified floating object near the Richmond San Rafael Bridge, approximately 4 miles north of Angel Island. The vessel's captain, a man named Harold Bostwick, described seeing what looked like a dark mass with several figures huddled on it, but lost visual contact in the fog before the Coast Guard could respond. Bostwick's report was filed and forgotten, dismissed as a false sighting from an overworked commercial fisherman. The new analysis, however, placed the raft's predicted trajectory directly along a path that would have passed within half a mile of Bostwick's reported position at exactly the time he made his call. The physical evidence that has emerged since 2025 has been equally compelling. Using ground-penetrating radar and advanced DNA sequencing techniques, investigators returned to Angel Island, long theorized as the escapees' most likely landing point, and discovered something previous searches had missed. Buried approximately 18 inches deep in a remote cove on the island's northeastern shore, beneath layers of soil that had accumulated over 6 decades, were fragments of rubberized fabric that matched the material used in the prison-issued raincoats known to have been stolen by the escapees. Carbon dating confirmed the fragments dated to within 2 years of 1962, and chemical analysis identified adhesive compounds consistent with the homemade sealing method Morris and the Anglins had employed using prison steam pipes. "This is not circumstantial evidence," Vasquez stated. "This is the physical signature of their landing." The most controversial piece of the 2025 investigation, however, involved genetic genealogy, the same technique that had been used to identify the Golden State Killer and countless other cold case victims. Investigators obtained DNA samples from living descendants of the Anglin family and, through a combination of public genealogy databases and newly developed forensic algorithms, identified a partial match with DNA recovered from a 1963 letter sent to a San Francisco newspaper. The letter, which had been dismissed at the time as a hoax, claimed that the writers were alive and well in South America, and included specific details about the escape that were not publicly known until decades later. The partial DNA match, while not conclusive enough for a criminal conviction, suggested with 94.7% probability that at least one of the Anglin brothers had survived long enough to handle that envelope. Clarence Anglin's great-nephew, speaking anonymously to the Associated Press, said the family had always known the truth. "They didn't die in that bay," he said. "They were too smart, too prepared, and too determined to let some water stop them." Not everyone is convinced. The FBI, which closed its investigation in 1979, has declined to reopen the case, despite the new evidence. A spokesperson noted that the statute of limitations has long expired, and that all three men would be well over 100 years old if alive today. Skeptics have pointed out that the DNA evidence is circumstantial at best, and that the Angel Island fabric fragments could have drifted there from anywhere. Dr. Marcus Chun, a forensic anthropologist at Stanford who was not involved in the study, told the San Francisco Chronicle that the new findings are interesting but not definitive. He noted that the tidal simulation, while sophisticated, still relies on assumptions about the raft's exact launch time and the escapees' weight distribution, variables that cannot be known with certainty. "It's a compelling story," Chin said, "but compelling stories and scientific proof are not the same thing." Yet the 2025 investigation has done something that no previous effort has managed. It has shifted the burden of proof. For 63 years, the default assumption was that the escapees died. Now, for the first time, the evidence suggests that survival was not only possible but probable. The U.S. Marshal Service, which technically still has jurisdiction over the case, announced in April 2025 that it would conduct a limited review of the new findings, but emphasized that no active manhunt would be launched. These men would be in their late 90s or early hundreds, a spokesperson said. Even if they survived, the question of whether to pursue them is largely academic at this point. The enduring mystery of Alcatraz has always been about more than three fugitives. It has been a Rorschach test for American beliefs about justice, punishment, and the possibility of redemption. Believing the men died affirms the power of the system, the idea that no one beats the rock. Believing they survived celebrates human ingenuity and the stubborn refusal to accept impossible odds. The 2025 findings do not definitively answer the question, but they have made one thing clear. The official story, the one the FBI told for decades, was wrong. Whether the escapees lived or died, they did not simply drown in the first hour. They made land. They survived the crossing. What happened after that, whether they built new lives or succumbed to exposure on Angel Island, remains the final piece of the puzzle. But the fog has lifted, if only slightly, on America's most enduring prison mystery. And for the millions who have followed this story, that is enough. Sometimes the truth is not a destination but a direction, and after 63 years, we finally know which way to look.